Good evening, everyone. I'm sure we'll have some more participants joining us as well. Hi, Vicki. And my name is Professor Jeff Gulley. I'm with my colleague tonight, Professor Carlin, and we are going to talk a little bit about the basics of legal research and Bluebook citation. We have a lot to cover. I see many of the students here tonight in our legal research and writing classes as I teach them frequently. So some of you, it'll be a review, some you'll be introduced to it for the first time, but don't forget later on in your studies, if you haven't taken legal research and writing, you'll have much more exposure than our time together at that time. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in and Professor Carlin's going to get us started.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, so welcome. I just want to sort of, I guess, lay the foundation for this. The whole, I guess, goal of this presentation is to sort of help you as the legal researcher understand what you need to do and your important essential role that you play in the entire representation process of every client. And you can see here, I don't know if you all can see me sort of, can you see me circle the bullet point with my cursor? No, probably not. Okay. Well, just looking at it, we'll start from the top to go down to the bottom. Obviously, without facts, we can't move forward. We can't figure out the truth. We can't identify what it is we can do for our clients, and we can't be the greatest, I guess, help to them in whatever aspect that we're looking for. So when we talk about your role as a legal researcher, it's to find the questions or the facts to answer those questions that we're looking for. Looking at the facts, summarizing the facts, that can be kind of challenging. Number three here, you see conduct legal research all the way through the end. It's really a specific identification of what we do. Some, like the fifth one down, drafting legal memoranda, it can be a little more hands-on. But it all begins with conducting or understanding how to conduct legal research, the best approaches to it, which is the approach that both Jeff and I are going to take today. So if you can go to the next slide, please. All right, so the approach that you should take, I guess you can just jump in and not really prepare a plan of attack. But really the first things that I encourage you to do is to ask the question, who's involved, and what is really being considered? What is the issue? And when we talk about like case briefing, one of the first things that you really are faced with in legal research is how to read a case and how to break it down into the most individual parts. And when we talk about the issues, finding out, what is the issue that you really need to consider when you're looking at a case? What are the issue or issues, and how does this really apply? The next step is really to ask the question, where does this activity take place? Meaning both for your clients, but also the legal research you're conducting. When you ask that question, then it can really help you identify in where you're going to conduct your research. One way to I like to think of legal research is like deep sea fishing. If you don't have all the fancy tools to help you identify the fish, or you don't have the knowledge and know where to go to the best spots to search for those fish, you're just going around in a big blue ocean, not knowing where to go. And so if you can identify where the activity took place, you can really begin narrowing down where in that huge ocean you're going to start fishing, or the legal research you're going to start conducting. Another question to ask is, when did the activity take place? If you can narrow it down to a particular time period, this will help you in your legal research. Narrowing it down is crucial. Why did the issues develop? That goes down to possibly the cause of action, what gave rise to the questions. All of these will go to the heart of when you're conducting your legal research, what is it you're looking for? So each one of these, and then how did the problem arise? Each one of these issues will sort of give you like guideposts on what it is you're looking for, how to find it, where to narrow down your search. And if you can identify, it's not necessarily to find answers to each one of these issues, but if you can narrow these down, each one of these issues will help you locate the best case that you're looking for, or a number of cases that really help you in your legal research. Next. So after you've begun with your approach, the next is you need to really begin with identifying the law. And so much like we do in everyday life, if I came to your job, you'd probably have a unique way of communicating and relaying what you do. The same thing when it comes to legal research. You need to put a lot of effort, a lot of thought into what type of language you want to use, what are the terms, and then play with different groupings of these terms, because as you play with these different search terms, you're going to find that different cases will come back more that will be relevant, and unfortunately others that may not be relevant. But again, it can really help you in your efforts. Like I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest things that you can do when you're fishing is knowing the good spot to fish on without wasting your time. Same thing is if you know what jurisdiction you're working on. If you're dealing with a state case, it's just like, breaking and entering. I'm from Montana, the state of Montana, but you're doing legal research for the Federal District of New York, you're wasting your time. You're wasting your time. You're wasting the firm's time. And so if you can identify quickly where you're going to be located, the case is going to be located, you can save a lot of time. The next question then you can sort of ask to limit, process elimination. And so John, part of that is it can be really a quick process of elimination, particularly if you just practice, probate cases in the state of Montana. Well, guess what? You can really narrow it down pretty quickly. And that's where some of the tools within Westlaw will come into play. And again, sort of piggyback off of that, what type of law you're dealing with. It's constitutional law, statutes, rules, regulations, case law. All this can help narrow down where exactly in that big ocean of legal research you are going to be focusing your research on. All right, so once we have the idea, next slide, please. Once we have the idea of where we're going to be doing our searches, then you want to really focus on, well, what sources I can use for this. Again, there's really two big buckets of legal research that we do. We can focus on primary sources of law, or we can focus on secondary sources of law. So when we look at the first list, you can see here, encyclopedias, ALRs, these are all great secondary sources of law. These are sources that help us understand the law itself. So if you're dealing with a case that is pretty confusing, having a secondary source of law to help clarify, maybe you can see the fourth bullet point down, legal dictionary, and I have a Black's Law dictionary behind me. This will help you understand how terms are used, the commonality of the terms, and potentially, depending on the type of resource you're using, other cases that utilize this. Now, when you look at case law, obviously these are judge-made decisions. Case law can be quite confusing and pretty in-depth. And so when you find these resources, annotated law or law review documents, law review articles that help you or narrow down the discussion, that will really help you along in your legal research and help with that building the understanding before you really get into the details of the case. Okay, let's see. Yeah, that's good. Next slide. All right. So yeah, one of the biggest recommendations I recommend that you start with is, obviously you need to cite to the court primary sources of law. You can't be like, oh, you know what? I read, Professor Gulley's law review article, and Your Honor, I should win. It's not going to carry much weight, as eloquent as Professor Gulley may be in the law review article. However, that law review article may really help you understand on a completely different level than just breaking open that case, the judge's decision. Looking at the second bullet point here, I keep circling on my screen, you can't see it. Read the law itself that's being relied upon, not just, in this example, Professor Gulley's interpretation of it. And that's where annotated versions of different primary sources will help you. It's the annotated, it's the comments, usually at the bottom, that will really help clarify and bring a lot of this into greater focus. Yeah, and the very last main bullet point, double check. You don't want to just do one and done, be like, oh, I conducted the research, that's good. I feel lucky today. It doesn't work out quite that way in application. You want to conduct multiple searches to see if you can replicate your search results. And usually when you begin to see common cases like, oh my goodness, I've been doing this research for 5 minutes now, and this one case keeps jumping out at me, then you know that you're really pretty much over that target or pretty close to that target. And do not forget, you really need to validate your primary sources. That if you know that this is the best case, this hasn't been something that's been overturned by a court, then you know that you're really over the target and you're doing quite well. Okay, next slide, please. The best way, I saw some questions, and I think Professor Gulley has been answering some of those, I hope. Looks like it. The best way to truly access Westlaw is by going to your course, click on content. You can see the steps right there. You can access it through the campus Purdue Global homepage, through the library. But ultimately, you're looking for Westlaw Campus Research. Once you are logged into the library, or once you're logged into the course page, there's no additional username, passwords you need to remember. It's going to be one really single sign-on. And once you find this main page, you're in like Flynn. This is what you're looking for, and it's the keys to the kingdom. This is one of the most coveted legal research databases available. So, all right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Tim. I'm going to take over now and get us started talking about Bluebook Citation, sort of the basics tonight, and maybe just a little bit more. Okay. So when we talk about the Blue Book, if you have had a legal research and writing class, 204 or the advanced class 244, you've been introduced to it, right? Maybe you sleep with your Blue Book close by, trying to get the osmosis going on, maybe put it under your pillow. It doesn't work, but what does work is practice, practice, practice. That's why in our courses, especially in your legal research and writing classes, you will practice on the discussion boards. You practice in your writing assignments. So it is the 21st edition is the latest. This was copyright, I think, 2020. So they'll probably come out with the 22nd edition, maybe next year. Yes. Oh, Vicky, academic and legal writing, APA 7, not Blue Book. So Vicky, where did you take that course? Did you take it somewhere else?
Nope, here in my master's program. I just haven't had Blue Book yet. So Blue Book.
Okay, got it. In your master's.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. In fact, in 204 and 244, we're so focused on the Blue Book that we don't allow APA for anything. So even internet citations is a different way. So, but we do this because this is the citation method used by legal professionals every single day. It's a resource, though. The book is a little over an inch thick, over 300 pages long. You don't have to memorize it, but we focus on, and what we're going to focus on tonight is some of the basic rules, talking about primary sources, first of all. So the purpose of citation is just to identify the document and tell them what you're referring to, like what page, if you're citing a case, right? I understand, Emily, it is a little difficult to go back and forth. That's why it's like some reminders, and but in some of your classes, you're right, it's APA for citations, but we do focus on Blue Book in your legal research and writing classes. I get that, Vicky. I totally get that. So you want to provide your reader with sufficient information so they can check it out. Also, like Professor Carlin said earlier, when you're arguing something in a document before a judge, you want to be citing appropriate authoritative sources, primary sources of law, right? And your citation allows the court or the judge or the judge's law clerk to look at that a little bit more, to actually bring it up. Maybe the judge likes to use, a computer on the bench. I did many years ago when I was on the bench and loved it because I could bring cases right up if I wanted to look at some authority even during a hearing. Yes, and we're going to go over various examples tonight Shannon, about how to cite. So, I mean, this is a quote from a case from federal court from the Northern District of Illinois, and just excerpted here, saying that plaintiff's complaint could have been drafted in crayon on the back of a napkin. Obviously, the judge not very happy, right? Not very happy. And when judges call out attorneys in an opinion, and if they do, you better hope it's a footnote if you're the attorney being chastised, but that's not always the case. That's not always the case. And, but yeah, so it's very, very important. You know, you're not going to draft it in crayon at all. You're going to do it in a special format, which courts require as well, pursuant to the court rules. So citation is so very, very important. And that is what we're going to focus on as far as the introducing you to it. And again, for those of you who have studied Bluebook, it's a little bit of a review. So a citation, when we talk about cite and we say cite and citation, we're basically just talking about a precedent. It could be a case, it could be a statute, it could be a treatise, a very scholarly secondary source, constitutional provision. So we're either citing it to support our position or to argue against our opponent's position, right? There's even a rule in Bluebook on how to cite the Black's Law Dictionary as well. I think I might have that on the slide. Rule 15.8. So the legal sources, and Professor Carlin sort of addressed these as well, but these are the types of sources. And when I talk to students in my legal research and writing classes, some people like to put tabs on this book, okay? I've been doing this a long time. Let's see, 35 years since I was admitted to the bar. And so I even, new editions, but it's like, the main rules don't change. So I don't have mine tabbed. I can actually get to what I need to if I need to verify something, but you don't have to memorize it. Because most students will put tabs on the rules for constitutions, cases, statutes, and regulations, and select secondary sources. That way you can just go right to your tab. It's also got a nice little short little index on the back cover, which also is a nice reference, and an index in the back as well. So it's very easy to get to where you need to go. You can tab the online version as well. Thank you, Harper, for pointing that out. That's right. On the official Bluebook website, you can buy the online version. What is it, about $35, $38 a year? If someone can confirm that for the online version. And the print, I think the print is like 45 or 46 if you buy it new. I think by now you can get some used copies of the 21st edition for a little bit less than that. So constitutions, let's start with constitutions. Rule 11. So it tells you how to break it down. It tells you how to abbreviate the jurisdiction and abbreviate the word constitution. Here are some examples for you on how to abbreviate the US Constitution and the Minnesota Constitution. There is an actual mistake on this, and I left it on here. Can anyone identify the citation mistake? And if some of you have heard me preach it enough, so you would know, or in my feedback for papers, but anyone identify the mistake there? The state is correct, Shannon. That's how Bluebook abbreviates Minnesota. The comma actually is correct as well, Melanie. Okay. All right, let's see. Constitution's abbreviated. Okay, no. All right, Melissa's got it. The article number, and Vicky's got it as well. The article number here, Bluebook says you should express the article number as a Roman numeral. So you see how it's appropriately cited here, Minnesota Constitution, Article 1, comma, section symbol. It's a quick Alt 21 on your Windows keyboard, and then 13. So if you're the same way, if you were be citing an amendment, I don't have that example, but if you're citing the amendment, it's AMEND period, and then the amendment is reflected as a Roman numeral as well. All right. Yeah, it's simple to make that, but I tell you, the more you practice Bluebook, your eyes will focus on things like that. You will. I joke about that, but I can see that immediately when I look at a discussion post, when I can look at your papers. It's like I gravitate small details. But yeah, Bluebook is all about every little punctuation mark, every little space. I know I sound like a Bluebook nerd a little bit, so self-professed. All right. Uh, so statutes, Bluebook. Oh, by the way, Bluebook Rule 11, I believe, is the shortest rule in the Bluebook on constitutions. It's basically a page. I think this edition, they may have gone over a page slightly. It used to be one page. I don't think any other rule is one page. It's not. It's over an inch thick. So our statutes come from our legislative bodies, right? Congress at the federal level, our respective state legislatures. The regulations are enacted by administrative agencies. So, well, those are cited in the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations. But we call them different things in our states. We may call them statutes. We may call them codes. It depends. It just depends on where you're at. At the federal level, our statutes are called collectively, and titles are called the USC, abbreviated for the United States Code. If you look it up in Westlaw's product, they have their own version. It's owned by West Publishing Company, called the United States Code Annotated. And we love annotation. We love annotated sources because they help us get to other sources, right? They have annotations at the end, whether it's a statute or a constitution. So here's just an example of how we break down a citation for a statute. The title number, and then we have the USC, the abbreviation for the code, the section symbol, and then the section number. Yeah, the constitutional slide, citation, and you would do the same, Vicki, if you put that citation on the references page, you would cite that Bluebook citation. Not where you got it from, like you never put the URL for Westlaw, by the way. It's just, so your full Bluebook citation in text is identical to what you would put on the references page. So you literally can copy and paste. Good question. Yeah, that's right, Rob. What's confusing about Westlaw? Don't think that Westlaw provides citations in Bluebook format. They do not. What Westlaw does, they provide you the information for you to put together the citation. I mean, some of it might be there at the top. Like if you look up an ALR article, American Law Reports, it's going to have part of that citation right at the top. So you can copy that part. You still got to put everything else, the author's name, the word annotation, the title. I'm ahead of myself. So Rule 12.32 tells us about the year. Based on the 21st edition, now when we cite the US Code, we do not have to cite the year unless you're filing in court and the court rules say you do, okay? But until we got the 21st edition of the Bluebook, the year was always required. Now it's optional, but it is required for state statutes. So here's another just visual for you on, I did get ahead of myself. So the year is optional, but you see the section number, the year of the code. So, and the year of the code, basically, I'll just quickly summarize that. When you're pulling a book off the shelf like that, okay, you would basically, the year would be the year on the spine of the volume, or open it up and that copyright year. Okay, well, online, in our online world we live in, and with Westlaw, which is awesome and we all love it, we don't have that. So you basically click on, there's a blue link right at the top of your source called currentness, and it takes you to the bottom of the page, and then you use that. It's almost always going to be the current year, but not always, especially when it comes to states and state legislatures, because some state legislatures meet more frequently than others. Right now, if you looked up a statute, because in one of my classes, students have been citing to Texas a lot, and the current year is 2021. I was quite surprised by that, and not that I didn't believe it. I went into Westlaw too, and just to verify and sure. But other states, it's at least 2022, or many of them are through 2023, because legislative sessions have legislatures have been in session already, and some of them have ended their year because most state legislatures are part-time. So when possible, we want to cite the official code. In fact, Bluebook will tell us in the back. When we go to the back to the tables, table T1 tells us additional format rules, and it will tell us to cite to the official rule. The year is absolutely right. It's just for states, Rob. You can cite the US code, but it's completely optional. So you can see the examples here. So the official is listed first, followed by United States Code Annotated. That's the version owned by West. And you can see the example. This is one way to cite to a statute you find in Westlaw. There's another rule if you want to get really, really technical, is rule 12.5. So you could use that to cite, and that's where you actually look at the bottom of the page of your source, and it's like West, comma, Westlaw through public law number. The West is, Westlaw is a product of West Publishing Company, which is owned by Thomson Reuters. That's the parent corp. And then finally, you see the citation. Lexis calls it US Code Service. So that's why if you see a citation USCS, that's just someone citing Lexis, which makes a good product. Some people like it. I'm a big fan of Westlaw from way back, but I have, back in the day, used Lexis from time to time. And these are examples from our states as well. These are examples. So it varies by state, the abbreviation. So table T1 in the back is where we go to. That's where we learned the format. That's where we learn the format of how to cite to our statutes. And there's different versions. For example, let's say the Indiana Code here, having lived in Indiana many years, but I no longer live there, but went to law school. So, behind me, right next to all my Purdue Global swag is an artist's rendering of my law school, which was Indiana University Bloomington. And if you know, there's a rivalry there as far as sports goes between Purdue and Indiana. Rivals indeed, absolutely. So if we were citing to the product in Westlaw, we would cite it Indiana Code Annotated, ANN period. Everything else is the same, except when we get to the parentheses, we would put West before the year. Okay, makes sense. The table includes all 50 states. It includes all US territories. It includes federal agencies. There are some international sources as well in Bluebook. So it is quite comprehensive, quite comprehensive. All right, and at this point, I'm going to pass the baton back to you, Tim. Take it away.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, so we saw statutes. Now let's switch gears and talk about cases. When we talk about an opinion, obviously we're talking about the opinion of a court. And so this is the written statement of the court in its decision, for or against whatever it may be. Now, as much as we may like the internet, we still need to think of traditional binded books when it comes to these court opinions, because we're going to see that this is crucial to citations as well. So they're going to be bound. And when they're bound in these physical books, they're known as law reporters or just simply reporters. These reporters obviously exist online as well, but we need to be aware that they exist physically. Next slide. All right, this is a nice little picture, as you can see here, of a reporter, just published volume, and it's going to be published, like we have West Publishing will have their own volumes. Some may be official, meaning they're published by the government, published by a particular region for a court, or they may be unofficial, meaning that they weren't officially published by the government, but maybe by a private publisher, Thomson, West, Lexis, etc. So just be aware of what those terms are, because it can get kind of confusing at times. Here is a classic citation for a case. Just to break it down into its essential three parts, really, you have the name of the parties, Brown v. Helvering, and you have it ends with a comma. You can see it's italicized, so we're doing great. We're following the rule of the Bluebook. The next is the volume number. That's 291. That's going to be the fifth, go out of my bookshelf, boom, pull it off to volume 291 of which publisher? It's the Reporter of US. This is the official United States Reporter. And if I broke open that book, only book I have is my blue book. So this is volume 291 of the official US Reporter. I pop it open to page 193. Well, guess what? At page 193, at some point on that page, will be the beginning of Brown v. Helvering. Hopefully I'm pronouncing the name right. And then the last part is you have the parenthetical of the year of the decision, and that's 1934. So that's a really simple, straightforward example. As you can imagine, it gets kind of confusing after that. All right. So we see this, opinions published officially, and you can see Morgan v. United States, 304th volume, U.S. Reporter, page 1. That's great. I got the first page. So it's going to look, when you see a citation like that, you can break it down into the basic parts, and you can understand if you're at the physical library, not as much as it was before, but if you decide to go to law school, I can probably pretty assure you that they're going to force you to do some old school legal research, and you're going to be looking for the 304th volume of that official United States Supreme Court Reporter. And quickly, as you can imagine, you see a citation like this and you see US, you're thinking, oh, that's it. If that case goes in my favor, it hasn't been overturned later in time, that's going to be pretty binding. I may have, found the jackpot there. Okay, let's go to the next slide. We've also talked about, we have official, unofficial. There are reporters that we saw US as the official US Reporter. There's also the Supreme Court Reporter. It's identified instead of US, it's SCT. This is published by Thomson West. You can see that LexisNexis has their own US Supreme Court Reports Lawyers Edition. But just you can see the inlay of the picture there. Different reporters published by different publishers. They all are going to have the same case in them, just published by different publishers. Just so you're aware, not to get too confusing, but it can be at times. Obviously, Blue Book addresses all these. Here we are. This is the official reporter for the US. You can see right there, 525. Let's see at the bottom, 532, 33, 34. Those are the volume numbers. Yes, they're really big. I won't go into pocket parts. Yep, so that's all right there. Okay, next slide. Here's an example of what the Supreme Court Reporter would look like. Next slide. And you can see here, here's the lawyer's edition. Okay, you'll notice it's annotated. Again, you're going to have the body of the site of the report of the decision by the court, and then you'll have some annotation, some commentary that's not primary law, it's secondary law. So which one is preferred, Vicky? So any of them can, well, the US Reporter would be preferred. Any of them can be cited so long as you're following the, as long as it's published. So you want to go with the US. Obviously, if you're talking about the annotated version, you can't cite to the annotations. You can only cite to the actual opinion itself. But honestly, when you're looking at the lawyer's edition, it's really helpful because it allows those added commentaries to help you interpret and understand additional resources, cross-referencing, if you will. All right. Parallel citations. So this sort of goes along with that, the question you asked, Vicky. When you have a decision that's published in multiple reporters, certain courts may require that you actually cite parallel citations, meaning that, so the second bullet point here, Blue Book Citation, Morgan v. United States, 304 U.S. 1, 1938. That tells the reader, hey, you know what, this is the Morgan case, 304th volume, pull that off, open page 1, boom, it was published in 38. The parallel citation, meaning you can find it in one, you can also find the same case published in another source. And this is a parallel citation will look like. Again, the first portion is the same, party name, 304 US 1, comma. This is the parallel citation, 58 SC or SCT 773. And then you have the lawyer's edition. So depending on the court you're filing your memo with, or your motions with, you may need to actually provide the parallel citation. Yeah, you definitely wouldn't want to cite to a secondary source. All right, so the main citation, the U.S. Reporter, and then the others are there to assist. Okay, Awesome. Then we talk about federal reporters. We talk about geographical regions. The federal reporter you can see here, F.2D or F.3D. This is the Federal Reporter second series. Federal Reporter third series. And that picture, yep, you can see in the picture just above the 37, 38, 39. That identifies that this is the third series in the Federal Reporter. Right? And here's the example again. Every Blue Book citation for a court is going to, a court's opinion, start out the same way. Parties involved, completing with a comma, volume, and you have the reporter identification, F.3D, what is the page, and then the parenthetical, you'll notice it's a bit more expanded. You want to identify which court that decision came from, and then the year. To oversimplify it, that's the basic elements when we have a Blue Book citation. Okay. Next slide. All right, then we talk about federal supplements, just to muddy the waters a bit more. These are select case decisions that could be reported in certain reporters. This is obviously the federal sup reporter, second series. I don't see it. Yeah, it doesn't look like that's just going to be the first series or the federal supplement. And again, party names, you're then focusing on the volume, the court, I'm sorry, the publisher. Oh, there we are. And then the page number. And again, Blue Book, this is sort of the parenthetical at the end that can be kind of the confusing part. I know a lot of students have problems with this, is identifying which court was making the decision. That's where that's where Westlaw can really come into play considerably. It may not give you the correct citation, but it's like playing darts. It'll get you pretty close. It'll help you identify what court you need to put in that parenthetical. Okay, next slide. All right, so again, we talked about the federal. We have different regions in which they'll be published. Now we can focus on the states as well. States are reported within the regional reporters. The West National Reporter System, set of reporters for each 50 states plus DC, and they're broken out into 7 specific regions. And you can see them, there's a list there you can look at, each one having their own unique, not acronym, whatever. The thing SW2D, it just escaped me. And yes, if you're looking for all this because it's not available and you're not seeing it, it's jumping out in your case, that's where the Blue Book will help you identify those as well. Okay, great little picture there. Here's the region, just for those visual learners out there, like I got to see a picture, you can see the breakdown for each region or each reporter by the region for the state cases. Okay, next slide. All right, so this is a classic example of what the Minnesota Supreme Court case would look like. Again, every case citation is going to look similar. You have the parties, plaintiff, defendant, finished off with a comma, italicized or underlined. Then you have the volume, the reporter, and then the page number. And then you can see Minnesota 1989. Whenever you see just the state alone, that's usually a good indication. That's the indication that's the Supreme Court for that particular state. You can see the appellate court. Again, you can do the Minigasco, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, Minigasco case, same way. And if it was before the Minnesota Court of Appeals, the parenthetical, that would be the identifier for that particular court making that decision. I hope that makes sense when it comes to what that looks like. Indiana, you'll see again, just look at the parenthetical at the back there. You can get rid of this, the identifier Indiana Supreme Court. That's telling you that is the Supreme Court for that state. And again, the appellate court been published in the Indiana Court, I'm sorry, the Northeastern Reporter second series, and it's Indiana Court of Appeals 74. Okay, next slide. All right, so some common issues that sort of seem to creep in everyone's legal research is, what about the V? You already showed us, what the case names. So it's a lowercase v followed by a period. I know it's pretty common. It feels right to put verse. I mean, you got the Clippers versus the Suns in basketball, or the Patriots versus whoever. Don't put that extra S. I know Professor Gulley and other instructors will ding you for not having it in correct format. And the worst thing you want to do is have a court bring it, or even worse, having the reviewing attorney or supervising paralegal look at your citations, and you may think like it's no big deal. I made the V capital, what a big whoopee. When you deal with this every day, these things stick out like a sore thumb, and it really brings attention to your work. And it does speak volumes about you, about your firm, and your client as well. No capital V, yes. All right, so VS, no. V capital V, no. It's a lowercase v. Okay, next slide. All right, so names of the parties. We talked about, I mentioned this briefly, use italics or underline. Never use first names of the parties unless it's like a corporation. You can see here, John Smith Inc. Don't be like, John Smith v. Paul Jones. Last names only, unless it's part of a corporation. Then you're going to include John Smith Inc. Yeah, so italicize the names. Don't overlook it as well. Again, I can't overemphasize the importance of making sure you have this right 100% of the time. Not just, if you can do it in the classroom, you'll be able to do it in the real world. And that's where it really is, it's going to speak volumes about you. Okay, next slide. Dates. Looking at the issue of dates, generally you're going to only have the year of the decision. Again, we can look at this, Bush v. Gore, 531 US 98 2000. Hopefully in our review, you're like, oh, well, that's a United States Supreme Court case. It's in the US Reporter. So boom, this is great. Nope. One more. Sorry, I don't know. There we go. Now we talked about official and unofficial published cases. Now, when you have unpublished cases, this is where the rules get kind of funky, and it requires a little greater detail. Someone asked that question earlier. Man, it seems like it's so confusing. West has one, Lexis has another. If you are going to be providing a citation to an unreported case, you need to follow the rules. Here is the rule. I keep circling it. There is the rule. Make sure if there are any local rules you need to be aware of. But again, like every other citation, it starts out with the parties' names, ending with a comma. Next, you got to find out what number it is. This is going to be the specific number provided by the court, followed by the year of the publication. You see WL. I'm sure we can all take a educated guess. It's published in the unofficial West Reporter. And you can see the parenthetical. It's a bit longer, but it's identifying this is the North Dakota, published in November 13th, 1998. If you can sort of get an idea of the basics for a citation, it gets a little easier. And then you'll get to the point where you can eventually do it off the fly and just know what is in there. And then you can narrow it down. Okay, next slide. Okay. Yes. All right. So we talked about V. Let's talk about US. You only want to use the entire name not United States of America, just United States, if the government is a part of the United States government is a party to the action. Do not use U.S. Don't use United States of America. Never abbreviate United States whenever it's part of a party to the claim. You can see here, United States v, small v, Church of Scientology, and we can follow this along. 973, that's the volume, F.2D, okay, Federal Reporter, second series, 715, parenthetical, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, 1992. All the information should tell you, if you need, in a pinch, bring up Westlaw or bring up whatever research database you're using, you know exactly where it is, the party's name, and the date of publication, and it really narrows down your search results. Okay, Jeff, hand it over to you.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Tim. All right, we have, we're in the home stretch, guys. We're like down to 10 slides. How about that? So I saw a question earlier about short citations, or Emily, you said you get tripped up by your introductory signals and short citations from time to time. So that is understandable, but guess what? Bluebook has a rule for it. Rule 4. I recommend tabbing Rule 4. If you're a tabber, okay, if you like to tab things, Rule 4, because what's so great, the very first part of Rule 4 has a list of cross references to listing every source and where to go to the specific rule. Like, oh, how do I do a short citation for a case? It'll tell you to go to rule 10 point something, right? And for every source, statutes, even secondary sources. So the first time we, in a court document, or a course assignment, we want to cite the full Bluebook citation in full, okay? And then we can use a short citation after that, like id, for example. Now, also in text, we get this question from time to time. It's different than APA. When you're citing Bluebook citations in text, they are not placed within parentheses. That is only APA. What you do is you finish your sentence, paragraph, whatever you're discussing, end it with a punctuation mark, usually a period, provide your full Bluebook citation, another period, and then you continue on. Okay. I understand, Melanie, not comfortable using id, but you will over time. But you can see, so here's a full citation for McDonald versus Eubanks, a case from the Arkansas Supreme Court from 1987. So the first time we would talk about that in our brief or our memo, we would provide the full citation. Then, as long as there are no other intervening citations, okay, we would then cite, we could just use it because we're referring to 770. But now we want to cite 771, so id at 771. That is, and there are some additional ways to cite that as well. But here's just a little bit more about id. But again, consecutive citations, you can't use it if there's an intervening citation. What's wonderful about Rule 4 in your Bluebook, it provides, I'm just giving you the highlights. It has a very good explanation of id. It talks about supra as well, infra, so some other signals that you can use as well. And for example, you can only use supra in certain situations. Id you can use for a lot of basically any type of a citation, primary or secondary. Id on a different page, even without intervening. That's correct, Harper, because you're still referring to your most recent source. That's what you're referring the reader to. Some other way to cite. If you've got the long cite as previously given, but the cite does not immediately follow, you've cited another case, for example. You can use a short citation format for non-consecutive citations. So here we cite the full case. We cite something from Katz versus United States. The Fourth Amendment protects people, not places. That's a very famous sentence that encapsulates the holding of Katz. And then short cite, because we've talked about another case, but now we're going to cite to it again, and for this with the same thing, okay, in my example. So Katz 375 US at 82. So that's a different way. We can't use id, but we can use this because we're reminding, oh, we're talking about Katz. You don't have to cite can you cite the full citation again? Technically you can. Technically you can. Emily, when you said just cite the US, so you can, but you know, Emily, Rule 4 talks about supra as well. Supra could be used for some sources, but it's not as preferred as it. Pinpoint citation. We just actually had an example on the previous slide we were just talking about, but a pinpoint citation is the page on which a quotation or relevant passage appears that you're talking about, right? As opposed to the page where the actual case or article begins. So the number 217 in this Baker v. Carr citation refers to the page number in the pinpoint citation. So pinpoint citation, where we are referring the reader to page 217. Look at this example, McConnell versus the FEC, a rather landmark decision from the Supreme Court back in 2003. Actually, I think most of it was overruled, though, by Citizens United. So check that out. If you want to check it out in Westlaw, validate your source, right? But it is a case 300 pages in length. Imagine trying to find a quote in that without a pinpoint, right? If you're going to direct me, if you're going to direct any professor, any judge, any supervising attorney, any colleague, yeah, give him a pinpoint. Mercy, right? That's right. The needle in the proverbial haystack. Exactly. And these are just some more pin site examples for you. I think you get the point here, right? Pin site. Some people use pin site. I've always been a pinpoint fan, you know, but the first time I heard someone use pin site, actually was in law school, but I've always preferred pinpoint. But either is acceptable and they're used interchangeably. Unless you have a boss you work for that says, you know, in this office, we use pinpoint, you know. And there are law firms like that. There really are. There are judges like that. So more abbreviations in case names. Oh my goodness, Bluebook tells us how to abbreviate everything. So in names, in the title of articles in a secondary source, but also in cases. So we go to table T6. Here's a link. If you don't have the Bluebook handy, Cornell's got some wonderful resources as well. We share with all of our students in LS 204 and 244. So they're free. Georgetown Law has a few things as well. But here's some common abbreviations and how you would use that in the citation as well. Like in the famous case of Brown versus Board of Education, the word board is abbreviated as BD and the word education, EDUC period. Even though you commonly see it just all typed out. But if you want to get real technical with Bluebook, you would abbreviate it accordingly. Even there's other tables in Bluebook to tell us how to abbreviate common names of courts, like probate court. Professor Carlin referenced the probate court earlier. Bluebook says prob CT. Minnesota, right? It's not mini, it's MINN, it's not MN, right? And you'll find that there's actually 5 states that aren't abbreviated at all. You don't abbreviate Ohio. You don't abbreviate Alaska, Idaho, Iowa. Darn it, I can't remember the 5th one. I was on a roll. It'll come to me, or maybe you could look it up in the Bluebook, right? Affirmed, right, Harper? That's right, a good abbreviation for affirmed. No, you do abbreviate Texas, Kristen, as TEX, TEX. I think you do abbreviate Hawaii, Rob. You guys are just trying. I can't think of it. It'll come to me, or maybe it won't, but table T13 gives you abbreviations for periodicals as well. Law review articles. So we do have a few secondary sources. We're getting close to wrapping up, so we only have about 4 or 5 slides left. That's right, Emily. Thank you. So in law review articles, there's an example at the bottom. It's from the Harvard Journal of Law and Technology. Okay, you could actually look up, if you don't know what J.L means. Well, first of all, if you looked up this article of Westlaw, it would have the full name somewhere at the top of the page. But we would cite to a law review or law journal article as such. The author's full name as it appears. If you have 2 authors, ampersand, more than 2, you just put the first one et al. Okay, that's similar to APA, right? The title of the article or the headline italicized, the volume number of the law review article, the abbreviated name, Harvard Journal of Law and Technology, the page number, where it begins, and the year of publication. So Rule 16.7.1, again, in our classes, in our research and writing classes here at Purdue Global, you know, this is one that students may want to just tab because for various assignments and discussion boards, we might reference it. Probably in the practice of law, not as much. You wouldn't, you're all in the law office, you're all about primary sources. You know what good secondary sources to use, and maybe your state has its own really good legal encyclopedia, and you have a collection in your law library. Some of those are good too. And here's an example of a legal encyclopedia, American Jurisprudence Second. So basically we use Rule 15.8, volume number, American Jurisprudence Second is abbreviated AmJur Second. The title of the article is always in italics, section symbol, page. Okay. It doesn't really mean anything unless you're actually looking it up in a law library in the bound book, right? Because you put that citation in and Westlaw is just going to bring it right up for you. And the date that it was published, the most current date that maybe if it was an updated date as well, whatever that date is, that will be readily available to you in Westlaw. In addition to American Jurisprudence Second, Westlaw has the full collection of CJS, Corpus Juris Secundum, which means the second body of law. So both are there. I like them both. Always been an AmJur fan from way back, but really good. And it's a great source of shorter articles. You know, they're not necessarily scholarly. You won't be citing to an encyclopedia article when you file something in court. I hope not. Because it's not that scholarly, but it's a great starting place, especially when you don't know anything about anything, right? Or about that issue, right? American Law Report, we mentioned, Professor Carlin mentioned that earlier at the beginning of the hour. Rule 16.7.6 tells us how to properly cite. It's long, it's lengthy, right? We always start out with the author's name, full name. The word annotation comes next, commas between everything. Yeah, it just, and you know what, Shannon, it comes with time. First of all, like the more you look up, if you look up an article in American Jurisprudence Second in Westlaw, right at the top of the page, every article you go to, it's going to have AmJur Second. So you'll see it. Same thing with CJS. So it's just practice. It's repetition. And that's why we do so many things on the discussion boards and writing assignments in those classes. That's right. Practice makes permanent. That is perfectly right. To offer another P. So we have the title of the article in italics. This is a really long title, right? And then the citation to the actual volume, the volume number, the publication, the page number, and year of publication. Newspaper articles, there's even a way to cite a newspaper article. There you go. I mean, there are, the Bluebook has everything. It will tell you how to cite to the Bible. It will tell you how to cite Shakespeare. So plays, I mean, it'll just everything. Yeah, there, and we got citations for internet sources too. We don't include the ULR for certain publications. If it's an internet source and it's not available, the internet source is not available in a print publication that we can cite to with a different rule, we would use the URL. And here, oh, yes, I thought I had a slide on this. So you are 18.2.2, and there's different parts to it depending upon if there's a date provided. So there's different parts of that rule, but basically here's an example on the slide. You can see on Slate, you know, the author's name. We got the title of the article in italics. This is an article where we have a actual date. Bluebook says you might see some blog post that has like a time. If it has a time, Bluebook says you got to include the time as well in the parenthetical. If there is no date, then you include like a last visited, or if it's updated. If it's not an original, it's an updated. Like some government websites are like that. You would include that in a parenthetical at the end. No retrieved from. That's right, Vicki, Shannon, absolutely. And some more web resources. Oh my goodness, we hit top of the hour and this is the last slide. So there are other sources to check out as well. There's the official Bluebook site. If some of you, if you don't have a Bluebook and you just can't wait to order as soon as we get off this webinar, right? There you go. So any final questions, comments, feel free. You can use your mic, type in the chat. I think we've been answering them as we've gone along. If we missed something, yeah, I know you got yours, John. You can, yeah, those are free sources, Shannon. If there's something locked down for its subscription, you won't, but they have, all of those are free. All right, take care, Vicki. Thank you for being here. There you go, Rob. All right, thank you, Melanie. Elizabeth, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Harper. Thank you, Kristen, Elizabeth. All right. Excellent. Thank you all for being here with us tonight. Tim, want to say anything as we wrap up?
Nope. Just yeah, thank you all for being here, and I hope this was insightful.
All right. Good deal. All right. Have a great evening, everyone. We'll see you in classes soon or down the road. Take care.